Okay, well, I've just been told that they're going to be taking you to the hospital soon, and everything's fine. They just want to check you over. But they're telling me that you're looking well, and everything's absolutely fine. Okay. Well, we just need to wait a little bit. Alright? So, what's that? Stories? Do I have any stories? Well, I suppose. I suppose I have many stories, yeah. You'd like to hear one? Well, I suppose I could tell you a story. In fact, I'm going to tell you something else about me. I'm not a normal fireman. I'm a magical fireman. Oh, I don't mind you knowing that. I mean, no one's going to believe you, are they? What do I mean by magical fireman? Well, my organization, my particular fire brigade, works with an organization that deals with the supernatural. So I am a firefighter who deals with issues of the supernatural that are to do with fire. That's not always that obvious. Yes, this incident was one of those. In fact, that is all we get called to. Incidents that are to do with magic and the supernatural in all its many forms. And so, for example, it might be that a dragon has gotten loose and is causing chaos. Of course, the fire will need to be put out. Sometimes a wizard can do that, but sometimes it's important that the public see a fire brigade turn up, because otherwise they'd find it rather strange if they saw a blazing fire in a building that suddenly went out. That would start to get people asking a lot of questions, wouldn't it? And if it happened over and over again, then people would start to investigate this mysterious phenomena, and that is why we have a fire brigade that comes and deals with this rather than just getting the wizards to do it. It's very difficult for me to pick a most interesting story, as there really are so many, there really are. But there is one that comes to mind. This happened to me a few years ago. We had a call that an old disused underground coal mine had set on fire. This isn't as unusual as you might think. Sometimes these coal mines can catch alight, and when they do, they can be very difficult to put out. In fact, without magic, they can be impossible to put out with the current technology, depending on the size of the mine. So, we went to the entrance of the coal mine, and it was filled with smoke, and we had our special breathing equipment, but we also had some other kind of equipment with us. Magical tools, a magical axe, a magical hammer for breaking down magical walls. We had magical breathing equipment to stop us inhaling dangerous magical spells. There were 4 firefighters, but I was the most trained, and I sensed there was something not right about it, so I said to the other 3 that I would go in first on my own. They argued with me at first, but then they agreed. I knew there was something not quite right about this. The reason we were called there by the supernatural detective agency who intercepts the calls when they come into the emergency services, the reason we were called there by them is because there had been sightings of what was thought to be a sorcerer in the area. I suspected there would be a connection. It would be quite a coincidence if there was no connection between these 2 things, and I immediately sensed the magic as I entered into the mine shaft. At first the smoke was white, but very quickly it turned purple and then red. I decided that I would call on a friend of mine, a little bird, actually, powerful but small. This little bird is quite extraordinary. The bird has the ability to teleport anywhere where there are rocks. I know it sounds strange, but it's quite useful. This was something they developed a long time ago in order to escape attack when they were floating and hovering around cliff edges. If prey came for them in the magical lands they were from, they learned to teleport through the rocks and out to another cliff. In this world, this little bird was using these skills for a different purpose. They offered their protection to the supernatural detectives and their associates in order for them to be allowed to live here on this planet. And so I thought to the bird, I sent my thoughts to it, and the bird appeared in one of the rocks. The bird immediately saw the red smoke and knew that there was a sorcerer doing something very evil and dark in the mine shaft. So together we pushed on. Now the other skills this bird has are quite extraordinary indeed. It has the ability to fire out a kind of net from the edges of its wings, and if it does this with both wings, like this way, then what it can do is it can essentially extend itself. These nets are very powerful, and they can either capture something or they can be used to attack something as a weapon. It's hard to explain, you have to see it really, but they can also walk on them like their legs. So now I'm moving down a mine shaft with a little bird with his wings out and these huge extended nets coming out of its wings, which it's now walking on, if you can imagine that. Of course, this is all rather normal to me. This is the kind of thing I see every day. We moved carefully as we entered, and then I started to hear the sound of crunching rocks, and I knew what was going on. The sorcerer was trying to summon molten creatures from deep within the earth, creatures that had been buried down there to keep them from causing harm on the surface. These molten creatures are not very bright and will follow a master if they are summoned. It's not uncommon for a sorcerer to try to do this, but it is incredibly dangerous, even for a sorcerer, because if the sorcerer gets it wrong, then these molten creatures can turn on the sorcerer, and then they are just left to cause chaos, wandering around the earth. This cannot be allowed, and the supernatural detectives will have been waiting outside the mine shaft in case any of them got out. I said to the bird, "This is what I think we should do. We need to create a distraction so that the sorcerer is not aware of exactly where we are. Then I need you to capture the sorcerer with your netted wings, and I need you to teleport them out to the rocks on the outside of the mine shaft." The bird agreed. You can see now I have brought the bird. Without the bird, I would have been in a lot of trouble. So I said, I need to think of a distraction. And I also didn't know how many molten creatures there were, if any. I didn't know if any had been formed yet. If there were lots of them there, that could have been very dangerous for me. So, I decided the best thing to do was to create a small explosion over to the side. And so, I went and planted a small detonator. Nothing large, but just enough to create a noise. And then I came back. We hid behind a rock. And I said, "Are you ready?" And the bird said yes. So, I pressed the button, made the explosion, and we watched, and we saw from where the crunching sounds of the rocks were, we saw the sorcerer emerge. He looked frustrated and angry because he knew he had been disturbed. He headed over to where the detonator had been, And I looked at the bird and I said, "Now." The bird flew over and wrapped the saucer in a net, and then quickly teleported them out to where the supernatural detectives were waiting. I was very pleased, and I stood up and began to walk back to the entrance, and just as I went to walk, I felt something grab my leg. I looked down and I felt the heat immediately. Fortunately, I had protective magical clothing on, but I could still feel the heat. And I saw the molten hand around my leg. One of the molten creatures that the sorcerer had successfully risen up had got hold of me, and if I didn't do something quickly, I would have been in a lot of trouble. I calmed myself down. The molten creature hadn't fully formed and was unable to stand, which was very helpful for me. I quickly grabbed some magical water and tipped it on its hand. The hand began to freeze and then break away, and the molten creature growled at me. I pulled my leg and stepped back, and as I looked up, I saw no less than 20 fully grown molten creatures, all stood up, fully formed, walking towards me. Well, I didn't have enough magical water for that, so I ran. I ran and I ran until I got to the entrance, and it was so nice to see so many supernatural detectives waiting for me. Oh, it was so nice to see that. I explained that there were at least 20 molten creatures coming this way, and they took out their staffs and they entered. What followed was a lot of noise, a lot of lights, a lot of magic, a lot of chaos. And after about 10 minutes, all of the supernatural detectives emerged. They looked tired, but they were fine. The sorcerer was taken away, and the mission was a success. That's just one of the intense things that happens to you when you're a magical firefighter. What's that? Oh, it looks like you're ready to go. Well, you're going to be absolutely fine. It was nice talking to you, and don't worry, you're safe now. Okay, well, you take care.